You're not like other women, and that unsettles him more than he will ever admit. From the moment you walk into a room, something shifts. Not because you are loud, not because you demand attention, but because your presence carries weight. There is depth in your silence, strength in your gentleness, and authority in the way you move through life without begging for validation. You don't blend in. You never have. And that difference shakes him at his core. You see, the world is comfortable with women it can predict, women who stay within limits, women who shrink their dreams to make others feel safe, women who apologize for their intelligence, their discernment, their calling. But you are not built that way. You were never meant to fit into a mold that was designed to contain you. There is something about you that resists confinement, and that resistance exposes what others have been trying to hide. Your difference is not an accident, and it is not something you develop by chance. From the beginning, there has been something about you that refuses to blend in, even when blending in would have been easier. You felt it in rooms where you were present but never fully seen, in conversations where your depth didn't match the surface level energy around you, and in moments when you realized you were thinking, feeling, and discerning on a level others hadn't yet reached. This difference is not a flaw. It is your power, even if for a long time it felt like a burden. When you don't fit into familiar patterns, people don't always know how to handle you. They are comfortable with what they can predict, manage, and label. But you cannot be easily labeled. Your mind moves with intention. Your spirit searches for meaning, and your heart refuses to settle for what is convenient but empty. That alone disrupts environments built on routine, compromise, and shallow expectations. You aren't trying to stand, yet your very existence challenges systems designed to keep people small. Your difference carries a kind of authority that doesn't come from dominance or demand. It comes from alignment. You know who you are, and because of that, you don't have to perform for acceptance. You don't reshape yourself to fit into places where you were never meant to belong. This makes others uncomfortable, not because you are difficult, but because your self-assurance exposes the insecurity they've learned to hide. When someone stands firmly in their truth, it removes the illusion that everyone else is confused by default. There were seasons when being different felt lonely. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were asking for too much, thinking too deeply, or expecting too much meaning from life and relationships. But over time, you realized that what felt like isolation was actually refinement. You were being shaped to stand without leaning, to see without copying, and to choose without pressure. That refinement gave you clarity, and clarity is powerful because it cannot be manipulated. Your difference means you don't move according to trends or opinions. You are not swayed by what is popular, loud, or immediately rewarding. You value substance over attention, truth over comfort, and purpose over approval. In a world driven by validation, this kind of grounding feels threatening to those who are still searching for identity in external sources. Your steadiness highlights their instability even when you say nothing at all. People may misinterpret your difference as distance, pride, or detachment, but what they are really witnessing is discernment. You don't open every door just because it's offered. You don't pour into every space just because you're invited. You understand that your energy, time, and presence are valuable, and you protect them accordingly. That protection is not selfish, it's necessary. It allows you to remain whole in a world that constantly tries to pull people apart. Your difference also means you don't compromise your values for belonging. You are willing to stand alone rather than betray yourself. That kind of courage is rare, and rarity always draws attention, sometimes admiration, sometimes resistance. Those who benefit from conformity will always feel unsettled by someone who refuses to conform. But you didn't come this far to delay yourself for acceptance that costs you your peace. Over time, your difference has taught you to trust your inner voice. You've learned to listen beyond noise, beyond pressure, beyond expectation. That trust has become a compass, guiding your decisions even when the path ahead is unclear. Others may second-guess themselves constantly, but you move with conviction because your choices are rooted in understanding, not impulse. This makes your life less chaotic and your presence more impactful. Your difference is also why you don't compete. You don't need to prove superiority because you're not trying to replace anyone. You know there is room for you without pushing someone else out. This mindset shifts energy in every space you enter. It removes comparison and invites authenticity, but not everyone is ready for it. that level of honesty. Some people thrive in environments where image matters more than integrity, and your presence disrupts that illusion. Eventually, you come to understand that your difference is not meant to isolate you. It's meant to position you. You are placed where depth is needed, where clarity must replace confusion, and where strength must be demonstrated without force. Your life becomes a reminder that it is possible to be grounded without being rigid, confident without being loud, and strong without being hard. Your difference is your power because it cannot be replicated. It is the result of your experiences, your choices, your growth, and your willingness to become instead of conform. And while it may shake those who encounter it, it will continue to carry you forward with purpose, stability, and quiet authority. Quiet strength is often misunderstood because the world has been trained to recognize power only when it is loud, forceful, or demanding. From an early age, you likely noticed that the people who talked the most were not always the ones who held the most influence. True authority does not need to announce itself. It enters a space calmly, settles in confidently, and changes the atmosphere without disruption. This is the kind of strength you carry, and it unsettles those who rely on volume, control, or intimidation to feel significant. Your strength does not come from overpowering others or proving yourself in every conversation. It comes from inner stability. You know what you stand for, and because of that, you don't need to react to every challenge or defend every decision. You choose when to speak and when to remain silent, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. That restraint is powerful because it shows mastery over yourself. And self-mastery is far more intimidating than outward dominance. People who rely on loud authority often feel exposed in the presence of someone quietly grounded. Your calm reveals their restlessness. Your composure highlights their insecurity. When you don't engage in power struggles, it forces others to confront the fact that their control tactics no longer work. They may try to provoke a reaction, raise their voice, or assert themselves more aggressively, but your steadiness refuses to give them the validation they seek. Quiet strength also means you're not easily shaken by external circumstances. You don't allow chaos around you to create chaos within you. While others may panic, react impulsively, or seek immediate reassurance, you pause, assess, and respond with intention. This ability to remain centered during uncertainty sends a clear message. You are not dependent on external stability to maintain inner peace. That kind of resilience commands respect, even from those who don't fully understand it. Your presence carries authority because it is rooted in consistency. You don't fluctuate based on who is watching or what you might gain. You show up as yourself in every environment, and that authenticity creates trust. People sense when someone is performing, but they also sense when someone is grounded. Your quiet strength doesn't shift with opinion or pressure, and that reliability becomes a foundation others can lean on, whether they admit it or not. Many underestimate quiet strength because it doesn't seek recognition. You don't need applause to feel validated. You don't need constant affirmation to know your worth. This independence from external approval makes you unpredictable to those who use praise or criticism as tools of control. When someone realizes they cannot influence you through flattery or intimidation, they often feel unsettled. Your freedom from those mechanisms exposes how dependent they are on them. There were likely moments when you questioned whether your quiet nature was a disadvantage. In a world that rewards assertiveness and visibility, silence can be mistaken for weakness. But over time, you've learned that your silence speaks volumes. When you do speak, your words carry weight because they are measured, intentional, and rooted in truth. People listen not because you demand attention, but because your voice brings clarity rather than noise. Quiet strength also allows you to see more. While others rush to be heard, you observe. You notice patterns, shifts in energy, inconsistencies in behavior. This awareness gives you insight that loud authority often lacks. You don't act blindly or impulsively. You act with understanding. That discernment protects you from unnecessary conflict and positions you to make decisions that are both wise and effective. Those who rely on loud authority may feel challenged by your presence because it removes their advantage. They cannot overpower you if you refuse to engage in battle. They cannot dominate you if you are secure within yourself. Your calm becomes a boundary they cannot cross. and boundaries, especially unspoken ones, are deeply unsettling to those accustomed to control. Ultimately, quiet strength reshapes how power is understood. It proves that influence does not require intimidation, and leadership does not require noise. You lead by example, by integrity, by consistency. You show that true authority is not about commanding attention, but about earning respect through character. This is why your quiet strength intimidates more than loud authority ever could. Loudness fades when the noise stops, but quiet strength remains. It endures, it stabilizes, it transforms spaces simply by being present. And in a world full of noise, that kind of strength is both rare and powerful. Self-awareness is one of the most confronting qualities a person can possess, not be because it is loud or demanding, but because it leaves no room for illusion. When you truly know yourself, you move through the world with a clarity that cannot be easily shaken. You understand your motives, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your patterns. This level of awareness creates an inner stability that exposes the inner chaos of those who have not yet faced themselves. Without saying a word, your presence invites comparison, and not everyone is prepared for that reflection. You are not guessing your way through life. You are intentional in your decisions because you've taken the time to understand why you think the way you do, why you respond the way you do, and what truly matters to you. This makes your choices appear confident and grounded. For someone who operates from confusion or denial, that confidence can feel intimidating. It reminds them of the questions they've been avoiding and the growth they've been postponing. Self-awareness means you don't project your unresolved issues onto others. You recognize your triggers and take responsibility for your healing. This accountability stands in stark contrast to those who blame circumstances, relationships, or people for their dissatisfaction. When you refuse to participate in blame games, it disrupts familiar dynamics. Others may feel exposed because your maturity highlights their avoidance. You don't need to dominate conversations to feel validated. You listen carefully, speak thoughtfully, and reflect deeply. This makes interactions with you different. People feel seen, but they also feel understood on a level that challenges them. You notice inconsistencies between words and actions. And while you may not always point them out, your awareness changes how you respond. That subtle shift can be unsettling to someone who relies on surface-level engagement to maintain control. Your self-awareness also allows you to recognize when something is not aligned with your values. You don't ignore discomfort or silence your intuition. When something feels off, you pay attention. This ability to trust yourself protects you from manipulation and unhealthy patterns. Those who benefit from confusion or emotional dependency often feel threatened by someone who cannot be easily misled. You understand that growth is a process, not a performance. You don't pretend to have everything figured out, but you also don't hide from your flaws. You face them with honesty and a willingness to improve. This humility paired with confidence creates a powerful balance. It shows that strength doesn't come from pretending to be flawless, but from being honest enough to evolve. That kind of honesty can be uncomfortable for those who have built their identity on appearances. When you are self-aware, you don't seek constant reassurance. You are not dependent on external validation to define your worth. You know who you are even when no one is watching. This independence shifts the power dynamic in relationships. Others may feel insecure because they cannot influence your self-perception with praise or criticism. Your sense of self is internally anchored, not externally controlled. You are also aware of your boundaries and the reasons behind them. You don't enforce them out of fear or bitterness, but out of understanding. You know what drains you, what nourishes you, and what compromises your peace. When you step back or say no, it's not impulsive, it's informed. This clarity challenges those who operate from impulse or people-pleasing because it reveals the cost of their own lack of boundaries. Self-awareness sharpens your discernment. You can sense when someone is being authentic and when they are performing. You recognize patterns before they fully unfold. This doesn't make you cynical. It makes you prepared. You don't overreact, but you don't ignore red flags either. That balanced response can feel threatening to someone who expects emotional reactions they can predict or manipulate. Ultimately, self-awareness makes you less controllable and more grounded. You are not easily provoked because you understand yourself too well to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. You don't need to prove your intelligence, your worth, or your strength. You simply live it. And that quiet confidence, rooted in deep self-understanding, naturally exposes the insecurity in those who are still running from themselves. This is why self-awareness shakes the insecure. It removes excuses. It eliminates confusion. It stands as living evidence that clarity is possible. And when someone encounters that level of inner truth, they are faced with a choice: grow or retreat from the reflection you unintentionally provide. Discernment is not about suspicion or fear. It is about clarity. It is the quiet ability to see beyond what is presented and to sense what is actually happening beneath the surface. When you live with discernment, you don't rush into emotional commitments, and you don't allow words alone to determine trust. You listen carefully, observe consistently, and allow time to reveal truth. This protects your heart, not by hardening it, but by guiding it wisely. You have learned that not everyone who speaks kindly carries good intentions, and not everyone who shows interest deserves access to your inner world. Because of this understanding, you no longer give your heart recklessly. You give it intentionally. That intentionality changes the way you form relationships. You move slowly, not because you are afraid of connection, but because you respect the depth of it. This approach can feel unsettling to those who are used to instant access and immediate emotional investment. Discernment allows you to recognize patterns rather than isolated moments. You understand that consistency matters more than intensity. Someone can show up passionately for a season, but only consistency reveals character. You pay attention to how people treat others, how they handle pressure, how they respond when they don't get their way. These observations inform your choices and protect you from repeating cycles that once caused pain. You no longer confuse attention with affection or charm with commitment. You've seen how easily words can be used to distract from a lack of action. Because of this, you don't rush to fill in gaps with hope or imagination. You let reality speak for itself. This grounded approach to relationships can feel confronting to someone who relies on emotional persuasion rather than integrity. Your discernment removes their advantage. Protecting your heart doesn't mean closing it off. It means opening it with wisdom. You still love deeply, but you love with awareness. You allow people to show you who they are instead of projecting who you hope they will become. This shift has likely saved you from unnecessary disappointment and emotional exhaustion. It has taught you that peace is worth more than potential. Your discernment also shapes how you respond to conflict. You don't react impulsively or escalate situations unnecessarily. You pause, reflect, and consider the bigger picture. You understand that not every battle deserves your energy, and not every disagreement requires explanation. This restraint preserves your emotional well-being and keeps you aligned with your values. There are moments when others may accuse you of being guarded or distant, but what they are really seeing is self-respect. You are no longer available for confusion, inconsistency, or emotional chaos. You don't need to announce your boundaries. Your discernment enforces them naturally. People either rise to meet your clarity or fall away because they cannot operate within it. Discernment also deepens your trust in yourself. You no longer second-guess your intuition when something feels off. You have learned through experience that ignoring inner signals leads to compromise, while honoring them leads to peace. This self-trust makes you less dependent on external reassurance and more confident in your decisions. Others may feel unsettled by this independence because it removes their influence over you. You understand that emotional availability is not owed to everyone. Access to your heart is earned through consistency, honesty, and respect. This understanding transforms how you show up in relationships. You are present without being entangled, open without being exposed, and loving without being depleted. This balance is rare and powerful. Ultimately, discernment is an act of self-love. It honors your emotional capacity and protects the growth you've worked hard to achieve. It allows you to engage with the world without losing yourself in it. And while this level of awareness may intimidate those who thrive on emotional excess or manipulation, it anchors you in peace, clarity, and strength. There comes a point in your life when you stop looking outward for permission to believe in yourself. You realize that waiting for validation keeps you tied to the opinions, moods, and expectations of others. When you no longer chase approval, something shifts inside you. Your decisions become clearer, your boundaries stronger, and your sense of worth more stable. You are no longer moved by applause or shaken by criticism because your identity is no longer up for negotiation. Not seeking validation does not mean you are arrogant or detached. It means you are grounded. You understand your value without needing it confirmed repeatedly. Internal assurance allows you to move with confidence rather than insecurity. You don't perform to be accepted, and you don't compromise your principles to be liked. This freedom is unsettling to those who rely on external affirmation to feel significant because it reveals how dependent they are on the reactions of others. When you stop chasing approval, your relationships change. You no longer attach yourself to people out of fear of being alone or rejected. You choose connections based on alignment rather than acceptance. This shift can feel threatening to those who are accustomed to being needed rather than respected. They may sense that they no longer hold power over you, and that loss of influence can create discomfort. You don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You don't wait for recognition to feel capable. You understand that your purpose is not determined by how many people affirm you, but by how aligned you are with your values. This mindset allows you to walk away from situations that require you to diminish yourself to fit in. You are willing to lose access to people who demand versions of you that are not authentic. Freedom from validation also gives you emotional stability. You are not constantly interpreting words, gestures, or silences to measure your worth. You no longer overthink interactions or replay conversations in your mind, searching for reassurance. This mental clarity creates peace and allows you to be fully present in your life. Others may notice that you are less reactive and more composed, and that composure can feel intimidating to those who thrive on emotional dependence. When approval is no longer your currency, manipulation loses its power, praise can no longer control you, and criticism can no longer derail you. You are able to receive feedback without internalizing it as a judgment of your worth. This emotional independence removes you from unhealthy dynamics where affection is conditional and acceptance is transactional. Those who benefit from such dynamics often feel unsettled by your refusal to participate. You also become more honest when you are no longer seeking validation. You don't tailor your truth to please others or soften your boundaries to avoid conflict. You speak with clarity and integrity, even when it's uncomfortable. This honesty is refreshing to some, but threatening to others. People who rely on ambiguity or people-pleasing often feel exposed by someone who stands firmly in their truth. Not chasing validation allows you to trust your own judgment. You don't need constant reassurance that you're making the right choices. You listen to your inner guidance and take responsibility for your decisions. This self-trust builds confidence over time and reinforces your independence. Others may feel unsettled because they realize you are no longer influenced by their approval or disapproval. You also begin to value solitude differently. Being alone no longer feels like rejection or failure. It becomes a space for clarity, growth, and renewal. You are comfortable with your own company, which means you are not desperate for distraction or affirmation. This comfort with yourself signals strength and self-respect, qualities that can feel threatening to those who avoid being alone with their thoughts. Ultimately, not chasing validation is an act of self-respect. It allows you to live authentically, make decisions aligned with your values, and form relationships based on mutual respect rather than dependency. This independence may unsettle others, but it anchors you in peace and confidence. When you stop seeking approval, you start living with purpose, and that quiet assurance speaks louder than any external validation ever could. There is a moment in growth when kindness matures into wisdom. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes protected. Boundaries are not walls built out of bitterness. They are structures built out of understanding. You don't set them to punish others. You set them to preserve yourself. When someone mistakes your boundaries for coldness, it often reveals more about their expectations than about your heart. For a long time, you may have believed that being loving meant being endlessly available. You gave freely, listened deeply, and tolerated behavior that drained you because you didn't want to appear difficult or unkind. But over time, experience taught you that unlimited access leads to emotional exhaustion. You learned that generosity without discernment invites imbalance. Boundaries emerge not from resentment, but from reflection. Wisdom shows you that saying no is sometimes the most honest form of kindness. It prevents false expectations and protects relationships from unspoken resentment. When you enforce a boundary, you are choosing clarity over confusion. You are choosing honesty over silent suffering. This shift can feel uncomfortable to those who are accustomed to your unrestricted availability because it changes the dynamic they once benefited from. Boundaries also redefine how you give. You no longer pour from emptiness or offer support at the expense of your well-being. You give from a place of fullness and intention. This allows your kindness to remain genuine rather than forced. When kindness is rooted in obligation, it breeds burnout. When it is rooted in wisdom, it becomes sustainable. Some people struggle with your boundaries because they were never entitled to your energy, but they became accustomed to it. When access is reduced, they may interpret it as rejection. But boundaries are not rejection, they are redirection. They guide relationships into healthier patterns or reveal which connections were. Be dependent on imbalance rather than mutual respect. Wisdom teaches you that not every explanation is required. You don't owe detailed justifications for protecting your peace. Your boundaries don't need to be debated or defended, they simply need to be honored. This quiet firmness can feel threatening to those who are used to negotiating or pushing limits. Your consistency removes their leverage. Boundaries also protect your emotional integrity. They prevent you from absorbing chaos that does not belong to you. You learn to distinguish between compassion and responsibility. You can care without carrying, support without sacrificing, and listen without losing yourself. This balance allows you to remain empathetic without becoming depleted. When kindness has boundaries, it gains strength. It is no longer fragile or easily exploited. It becomes deliberate and grounded. You choose where to invest your time and emotional energy based on alignment rather than guilt. This discernment may feel unfamiliar to others, but is essential for long-term emotional health. You may notice that as your boundaries become clearer, some relationships fade. This is not a failure, it is a filter. Those who respect your limits often grow closer, while those who resist them often fall away. This process reveals who values you for who you are rather than for what you provide. Ultimately, boundaries are an expression of self-respect. They honor your capacity, your values, and your growth. They allow your kindness to remain sincere and your heart to remain open without being overexposed. Wisdom understands that love without limits is not sustainable. Boundaries are not coldness, they are clarity. And clarity protects both you and the connections that are meant to remain. There is a quiet strength in choosing to stand alone when everything in you wants connection. It goes against NCT, against comfort, and against the fear of being misunderstood. Yet there comes a moment when you realize that companionship without alignment costs more than solitude ever will. Standing alone is not a sign of emptiness. It is evidence of self-respect. It reveals a willingness to honor your values even when no one else is standing beside you. You learn over time that loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness feels like absence, but solitude feels like presence with yourself. When you are willing to stand alone, you are choosing solitude over compromise. You are choosing clarity over confusion. This choice exposes the difference between wanting connection and needing it to feel whole. You no longer depend on others to complete you because you have learned how to be complete within yourself. Standing alone requires courage because it means resisting the pressure to conform. Society often rewards sameness and discourages depth. When you refuse to lower your standards to fit into spaces that cannot hold you, you challenge unspoken expectations. This makes some people uncomfortable, especially those who settled into roles or relationships out of fear rather than conviction. Your willingness to wait exposes their reluctance to do the same. You begin to understand that being alone is not a punishment, it is a process. It is a season of refinement where distractions fall away and clarity takes root. In solitude, you hear your own voice more clearly. You learn what truly matters to you, not what you were told should matter. This self-knowledge strengthens your foundation and makes future connections more intentional rather than desperate. Those who fear being alone often confuse attachment with love. They stay in situations that drain them because the idea of separation feels unbearable. When you choose to stand alone, you disrupt that narrative. You demonstrate that peace is possible without constant companionship. This challenges others to confront their own fear of emptiness, and not everyone is ready for that confrontation. Standing alone also sharpens your discernment. Without external influence, you begin to notice patterns in your past choices. You recognize where you compromised too much and where you ignored your intuition. This awareness allows you to grow, heal, and prepare for healthier relationships. You don't rush back into connection just to fill space. You wait until alignment replaces convenience. There is strength in not needing to be chosen. When you stand alone, you remove yourself from competition and comparison. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's attention or approval. This independence shifts how others perceive you. They sense that you are not easily swayed, not easily controlled, and not easily replaced. That realization can be unsettling to those who rely on dependency to feel valued. Standing alone teaches patience. You learn to trust timing rather than force outcomes. You understand that rushing into the wrong connection delays the right one. This patience is not passive, it is intentional. It allows you to build a life that is stable and fulfilling on its own rather than waiting for someone else to provide meaning. When you are comfortable standing alone, you approach relationships from a place of choice rather than need. You don't attach out of fear or obligation. You connect because there is mutual respect, shared values, and emotional maturity. This changes the quality of your connections and raises the standard for who has access to your life. Ultimately, the willingness to stand alone reveals a deep inner strength. It shows that you value integrity over comfort and truth over temporary security. This strength may expose the fear in those who avoid solitude at all company. But for you, standing alone is not an end. It is a foundation. It prepares you to walk into future connections, whole, grounded, and unafraid. Growth and healing are not passive experiences. They are choices made repeatedly in the face of pain. When life wounded you, you had options. You could have allowed bitterness to take root, resentment to harden your heart, or distrust to define your future. Instead, you chose to reflect, to learn, and to rebuild. That choice alone sets you apart because many people remain stuck in what hurt them rather than moving through it. You didn't deny the pain or minimize it. You faced it honestly. You acknowledged the disappointment, the rejection, the betrayal, and the loss. Healing began when you stopped pretending you were unaffected and allowed yourself to process what happened. This honesty required courage. It meant sitting with uncomfortable emotions rather than distracting yourself from them. That willingness to feel deeply is the foundation of true healing. Growth required responsibility. You examined your patterns, your boundaries, and your expectations. You asked difficult questions about why certain situations repeated and what lessons they carried. Instead of assigning blame, you focused on understanding. This self-reflection allowed you to change how you showed up in your life and relationships. It wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. As you healed, you noticed subtle shifts. Your reactions softened, your triggers lost their intensity. Situations that once overwhelmed you no longer held the same power. This didn't happen overnight, but gradually. Healing rewired how you interpreted experiences. You stopped seeing challenges as threats and began seeing them as information. This shift gave you emotional resilience that cannot be easily shaken. You also learned the difference between guarding your heart and closing it off. Healing taught you to remain open without being unprotected. You developed discernment instead of defensiveness. This balance allowed you to love without losing yourself and trust without being naive. It showed you that strength and softness can coexist. Growth reshaped your perspective on relationships. You stopped expecting others to fill gaps you were meant to address within yourself. You recognized that healthy connections are partnerships, not rescues. This understanding freed you from dependency and allowed you to engage with others from a place of wholeness rather than need. Through healing, you gained compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. You stopped judging your past choices harshly and began honoring the survival they represented. You realized that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. This self-compassion released guilt and created space for renewal. Growth also brought clarity. You became more selective with your time, energy, and emotional investment. You no longer entertained situations that drained you or relationships that required constant justification. This clarity was not coldness. It was respect for the work you had done to heal. You protected your peace because you understood its value. Others may notice that you are calmer, more grounded, and less reactive. What they are seeing is the result of internal work. Healing removed the need to prove yourself or seek validation. You are no longer driven by unresolved wounds, but by intentional choices. This stability can feel unsettling to those who are still operating from pain. Ultimately, growth and healing set you apart because they transformed you without hardening you. You emerged wiser, not bitter, discerning, not closed, strong, not rigid. Your journey stands as quiet evidence that pain does not have to define you. It can refine why, and that refinement becomes a source of strength, clarity, and peace that cannot be taken from you. There is a distinct power in the way you lead without competing, influence without dominating, and inspire without comparison. You don't measure your worth against others, and you don't seek to outshine anyone. Instead, you focus on becoming the fullest version of yourself, and that commitment quietly raises the standard in every space you enter. This approach unsettles those who believe leadership requires superiority or control because your way proves otherwise. You lead by how you live. Your consistency, integrity, and self-respect speak before you do. People observe how you handle pressure, how you treat others when there is nothing to gain, and how you remain grounded in your values. This kind of leadership doesn't need a platform or title. It naturally attracts attention because it is authentic. When people see someone living in alignment, it challenges them to reflect on their own choices. Competition thrives on comparison, insecurity, and the need to prove worth. You have stepped away from that cycle. You understand that someone else's success does not diminish your own, and your growth does not require anyone else's failure. This mindset frees you from unnecessary tension and allows you to celebrate others without feeling threatened. For those still trapped in comparison, this freedom can feel disorienting. Leading by embodiment means you don't tell others what to do, you show them what is possible. You don't demand change, you model it. This approach removes resistance because it invites rather than imposes. People are more likely to grow when they feel inspired rather than pressured. Your life becomes a living example that integrity, discipline, and clarity create stability and fulfillment. You don't compete for attention or validation. You don't rush to prove intelligence, strength, or capability. Your confidence is quiet because it doesn't rely on external affirmation. This creates an energy that is steady and trustworthy. Others may sense that you are not trying to impress, which makes your presence refreshing and grounding in environments often driven by ego. Embodied leadership also requires self-awareness. You recognize your limitations and continue to grow without pretending to have all the answers. This humility strengthens your influence because it builds trust. People feel safer on someone who is honest about their journey. Your willingness to learn and evolve shows that growth is a continuous process, not a performance. You elevate others by refusing to diminish yourself. You don't shrink to make people comfortable, but you also don't inflate yourself to feel important. You hold space for others to grow without comparison or competition. This balance creates environments where collaboration thrives and authenticity is encouraged. Those who rely on hierarchy or dominance may feel challenged by this approach because it removes their advantage. When conflict arises, you don't seek to win. You seek understanding. You listen, reflect, and respond thoughtfully. This composure disarms defensiveness and encourages honest dialogue. It shows that strength is not about overpowering others, but about maintaining integrity under pressure. This way of handling conflict sets a tone that influences others to approach challenges with maturity. Your leadership by embodiment extends beyond words and actions into presence. People feel the steadiness you bring into a room. Your calm, focus, and clarity shift the atmosphere. This influence cannot be forced or replicated. It is the result of inner work, discipline, and alignment. Those who depend on control may feel unsettled because your presence removes the need for it. Ultimately, leading by embodiment is powerful because it cannot be challenged or taken away. It does not rely on position, recognition, or comparison. It is sustained by character and consistency. You don't need to compete because you are not trying to replace anyone. You are simply living in alignment with who you are, and that alignment becomes an invitation for others to rise rather than retreat. Wholeness is deeply unsettling to those who are still fragmented within themselves. When you are complete, not flawless, but integrated, you carry a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances or approval. You know your strengths and your limitations, and you are no longer at war with either. This inner alignment creates a stability that cannot be easily influenced, and that stability becomes confronting to anyone who is still searching for themselves in external places. Being whole means you are honest with yourself. You no longer deny your wounds, but you also don't allow them to define you. You've done the work of reflection, healing, and growth. You've faced uncomfortable truths and accepted responsibility for your part in your journey. This self-awareness brings clarity, and clarity eliminates the confusion that once made you vulnerable to manipulation or self-doubt. Wholeness changes how you move through the world. You don't overreact to criticism because your sense of worth is not built on praise. You don't cling to approval because you've learned to approve of yourself. When feedback comes, you can receive it without defensiveness and release it without internalizing it. This emotional balance feels threatening to those whose self-esteem depends on constant validation. You are complete because you no longer expect others to fill gaps within you. Relationships are no longer a source of identity, but a space for connection. You engage with people from a place of choice rather than need. This shifts the power dynamic. Others may feel unsettled because they realize they cannot control or influence you through attention, affection, or withdrawal. Your independence removes their leverage. Wholeness also gives you patience. You don't rush outcomes or force connections. You trust timing because you are not driven by fear of missing out or being left behind. This calm confidence stands in contrast to the urgency many feel when they are trying to prove their worth or secure their place. Your patience highlights their restlessness. When you are whole, you don't compete or compare. You understand that your journey is unique and cannot be measured against someone else's path. This freedom from comparison creates peace, but it also exposes insecurity in those who constantly measure themselves against others. Your lack of rivalry can feel unsettling because it removes a familiar framework for validation. Wholeness does not mean you have no struggles. It means your struggles no longer define you. You face challenges with resilience rather than panic. You trust your ability to adapt, learn, and grow. This confidence in your capacity to handle life creates a sense of safety within yourself. Others may sense this security and feel exposed by their own uncertainty. You're not perfect and you don't pretend to be. You're honest about your flaws and committed to growth. This authenticity creates depth in your character. It shows that strength does not come from appearing flawless, but from being real. For those who rely on appearances to maintain control or admiration, this authenticity can feel threatening. Wholeness also sharpens your boundaries. You know what aligns with your values and what doesn't. You don't tolerate disrespect, but you don't react with hostility either. You simply step away. This calm detachment signals strength and self-respect. It shows that you are not afraid of loss because you are not losing yourself. Ultimately, being complete is your greatest threat to insecurity because it cannot be shaken by external forces. Your peace does not depend on circumstances, people, or outcomes. It is rooted in self-knowledge, acceptance, and alignment. This wholeness becomes a mirror that others cannot ignore. It invites growth for those who are ready and creates discomfort for those who are not. But for you, it is freedom. The quiet confidence of knowing you are enough exactly as you are.